Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of A Game in a Chair brought to you by the American Civil War Gaming Club. My name is Blake, I am the host here on this show, and in today's episode I'm going to be giving you some more of my top picks, this time for Campaign Chickamauga. And I'm going to tell you my top 5 scenarios to play with this title. Remember, all of these are just my opinion. Starting with number 5 now. It is Scenario 095, Great Clash north of the Cumberland. This scenario has 40 turns and features 2 very large armies led by Rosecrans and Bragg. The numbers are shown on the screen there. The Federals have 69,000 and the Confederates about 66,500. As I mentioned, this is a massive battle. It is the largest battle, in fact, with Campaign Chickamauga. If you're simply looking for the battle with the most men with Campaign Chickamauga, here you go, this is it. With this scenario, you begin fighting from the very start. The armies start in close proximity to one another, and as you can see, there is a lot of cavalry in this battle. And they're going to make contact immediately. So if you play this scenario, you're going to be fighting from turn number 1. Now the reason it's not higher on my list is because the scenario is simply too short, and the map is too small. There's just not enough elbow room in this scenario or on this map to justify the amount of men engaged in this battle. If there was about 15,000 fewer, it might actually be a better scenario. But I think they just wanted to put all the men onto one map and let the players go at it, and you know what? I'm okay with that occasionally. If that's the kind of battle you're looking for, then you're really going to enjoy this one. One other thing I will say that I think sort of hurts this scenario is that it only has exit hexes on the borders of the map. It doesn't have any regular objectives on the battlefield. I kind of wish it was the opposite, because exit hexes aren't really that useful in these games. Sure, it does anchor the 2 different sides to their side of the map, so I do understand the rationale behind them, but I just think with 40 turns it's pretty unrealistic that one army is going to destroy the other and reach the other side of the map. I would have liked to have seen just regular objectives on this battlefield, which would have made the 2 armies fight over different geographic areas. So that's why this scenario is rated number 5 on my list. Alright, we're going to move now to number 4, and it is Scenario 039, Chickamauga, the Historical Battle, with 85 turns. We have Rosecrans and Bragg once more in this battle. The Federals have 55,000 and the Confederates nearly 58,000. The statistics for the 2 sides are listed there underneath each general. And I'll tell you one thing about Chickamauga, as if you didn't already know this if you ever played it. Again, this is a bloody scenario. Just like with a Great Clash north of the Cumberland, this one gets you into the action right away, and it never stops. And overall, this is a very straightforward battle. Find the enemy and kill the enemy. I mean, I could go on, but I don't see any point to. If you've played it, you know that's all there is to the Battle of Chickamauga. And as I said, the action is non-stop. So if you are engaged in this 85-turn game, you better be prepared for a long slugging match. And the reason it is a long slugging match, and the reason it's not higher on my list, is because, again, the map is too small. I really wish that they would have used the larger Chickamauga to Chattanooga map and given the 2 sides some more space to maneuver around one another. But they opted to use the smaller Chickamauga map, and I think it hurts this scenario because you have too many men on a map, again, that's too small. But maybe that's just my opinion, and other people disagree and think that it's a really quality scenario. I mean, for me it is number 4, so it is a good one. I just think it could have been better. And one of the reasons I think that also is that the objectives don't matter with this battle. And this is something I talk about a lot whenever I review games, is that if you only have objectives worth 50 points, then there's absolutely, positively no reason to worry about them. And that's a problem I have with this particular scenario. It does allow both sides to create their own plans and not worry about the objectives. But if you're refighting a historical battle, as opposed to a what-if or make-believe battle. You kind of want those objectives to be worth more points, so it forces the two sides to follow the traditional trajectory of the battle and recreate it in a more historical fashion. So that is my number 4, the Battle of Chickamauga. Moving now to the number 3 scenario for me, I'm going to go with one that probably not a lot of people have thought about or would really anticipate. And that is scenario 013, Open Knob 3 p.m. This is part of the historical Battle of Perryville. This is 10 turns and has a force led by McCook against a division led by Benjamin Cheatham. Now the numbers for this battle are obviously pretty small, and you might be wondering, why is this in my top 3? I've always been an advocate for these smaller and medium-sized scenarios. I often think that they pose a greater challenge to the players than do the big ones, because you don't have time to make up for any mistakes that you make. You have to be perfect for 10 turns to win this battle, and I like that. Now the battle does begin as a draw, which for me is something I always look for in a game. My personal preference is to give both sides the opportunity to decide whether to attack or defend, and that can only really happen if the battle begins as a draw. And as I said, with 10 turns, every decision that you make is critical. If you make a decision and you perhaps waste a turn or two doing something that doesn't work, that's 20% of the 10-turn game. So you can't afford to make any mistakes when you play a shorter scenario. Another reason that I like this scenario is because it is a great meeting scenario. If you've just met someone and you're trying to gauge their skill set and whether or not you want to perhaps commit to playing a larger game against them, this is a great scenario to test them out on. If you play them in this scenario and one side or the other just dominates, you probably won't have a very good time in a larger scenario because you'll be mismatched. But if you play this 10-turn game, you enjoy each other's company, and the game is even and competitive, well then you're probably at the same skill level and would enjoy playing this person in a longer game. So I've always been someone that says you should play these meeting scenarios just to get to know your opponent before committing to a larger game. Another factor with this battle which I like is that it emphasizes the importance of cavalry, especially for the Confederate player. They are the only ones with cavalry in this battle, and you might think that that is an advantage, and maybe it is, but then again, if used incorrectly, it can be a major liability for the Confederates, because losing cavalrymen is much more costly as far as victory points go than losing infantrymen. And if the Confederate player is reckless with their cavalry and they get them shot up, they're probably going to lose this scenario. So I think it really helps to gauge how well a player knows the correct use of cavalry in even a small battle like this one. One quirk with this scenario that I do have to bring up, though, is that there are no supply wagons. I wish there was, but there isn't. It's only a 10-turn game, so chances are that's not going to be the deciding factor, but it does have to at least be in the back of your mind that you might have to change up your plans based on the supply situation. Alright, we're getting closer to the top of my list. For my number 2 scenario, I have 019 Murfreesboro version 2. This is an 85-turn game with Rosecrans versus Bragg. The Federals have 55,000 men, and the Confederates just under 47,000. But let's break down the numbers a little bit more at this battle and spend an extra minute or two talking about it. For the Federals, they have 48,265 infantry, and the Confederates 39,583. As far as quality goes, the Federals are rated 3.78 on a scale of 1 to 6, 1 being the lowest and 6 being the highest. That would be a perfect A rating. For the Confederates, they have a rating of 4.12, which is a C rating, whereas for the Federals, they have a D rating because it's below 4. But that's just the average for the two sides. With cavalry, the Federals have 3,068, and the Confederates 4,272. With quality, again, it's a pretty large difference between the two sides. The Federals have a rating just below a C with 3.95, and the Confederates just below a B rating with a 4.8. With artillery, the Federals have 3,825 men, and the Confederates 2,900. That means 153 guns for the Federals and 116 for the Confederates. So the two sides are relatively even, I would say. The Confederates do have advantages with their cavalrymen and their quality, but the Federals have more guns and more infantrymen. Really, it seems like that's the standard for most WDS Civil War games. Looking at the victory dialogue now at the start of this scenario, you can see that it begins as a draw for the two sides, and I've always liked that because I just think it gives each side the opportunity to decide what their battle plan is going to be, and neither side is committed to having to attack just to reach a draw status. Let's talk a little bit more about this scenario real quick, and as I've already said, this battle does begin as a draw. With this particular scenario, both sides have been reinforced. This is a larger Murfreesboro battle than the historical Battle of Murfreesboro. The Confederates have been reinforced with Stevenson's division, and for the Federals, they get the majority of Thomas's corps to the battlefield in time for the fighting. And because both sides have been reinforced, this maintains the traditional Union advantage in numbers that they have throughout most of the battles in the WDS series. And so, as opposed to perhaps Murfreesboro version 1, where only the Confederates are reinforced but the numbers for the two sides are roughly equal, I actually prefer this one because it allows the Federals to maintain their advantage, which I think, because they have lower quality, they actually need. One other thing that I really like about this scenario as opposed to the historical one is that it is 2 days, and it makes it so much better than it being 3 days. Fighting a 3-day Battle of Stones River is a drag. It really is. For various reasons, but chiefly because of the supply situation. Neither army really has enough supplies to fight a full 3-day battle. So with this one only being 85 turns in 2 days, it makes it the perfect length. One issue I do have with this scenario is that the objective points are meaningless. Absolutely meaningless in this one. So although you aren't technically playing a historical Battle of Murfreesboro, I would have still liked to have seen the objective points worth something more than 50 or 100 points, because that's not going to influence and shouldn't influence how you play this game. Both sides should really just ignore the objective hexes and make the enemy army their number one objective, because you're going to get a lot more points from inflicting losses on your enemy than you will by taking or holding these very minor objective flags across the map. So one more thing I have to say about the Battle of Stones River, and I've already touched on it before, is that you do need more supply wagons. Thankfully, this is a 2-day scenario, and not a full 3-day scenario like the historical one. So the supply situation isn't as extreme, but nonetheless, you still have to ration your ammo and take into account that you just simply don't have a lot of it in this scenario. Alright, we are now down to my top scenario for Campaign Chickamauga. Any guess what it is? Well, if you know me very well, or if you've ever played against me with Campaign Chickamauga, you probably know that my favorite is Scenario 009, the Battle of Perryville, which is a meeting engagement scenario. It is 35 turns long and features Don Carlos Buell's army up against Braxton Bragg's, reinforced by Kirby Smith. The Federals have 44,000 men, and the Confederates about 41,000. Breaking down the numbers for the two sides, the Federals have 37,718 infantrymen, and the Confederates 33,631. As far as quality goes, the Federals are rated just a 3.53, which is pretty low. It's basically a solid D rating. For the Confederates, they are rated 4.11, which is a low C rating. With cavalry, the Federals have 3,122, and the Confederates 5,000. The quality of the cavalrymen is 3.96 for the Federals and 4.98 for the Confederates. With artillery, the Federals have 2,975 men versus 2,500 for the Confederates, which is 119 artillery pieces and 100 for the Confederates. Now, the victory dialogue at the start of the scenario is on the screen there, and as is the case with a lot of my favorite scenarios, this battle does begin as a draw. Talking a little bit more about this scenario, as I've already said, it begins as a draw, which allows, especially in a meeting engagement, both sides to choose if they want to go on the offensive or if they're going to be more conservative and see if the enemy attacks them first and play defensively. And I really like that, especially in a meeting engagement scenario. With this battle, as opposed to perhaps Great Clash north of the Cumberland or Battle of Chickamauga, here you have good-sized forces on a good-sized map. There's just enough room and there's just enough men to where the map works really well. And I just think this is a really well-designed scenario in relation to the number of men on the map and the two forces fighting one another. And this is a meeting engagement battle, which I said before, and I think a lot of people are really drawn to meeting engagement battles. I think it's something about just entering a battlefield with a clean slate that we all really like, so that's why they're probably always so popular. So one thing about this scenario which is noteworthy is that there are no objective hexes on this map. Now, I could criticize that, but I'm not going to, because I think it works here. If it's a historical scenario, then there should be objective hexes on the map. But if it is a make-believe scenario like this one, I don't really have a problem with it. I actually think it works here because it allows the two sides to decide what part of the map they want to fight over and where they want to go. So it does work with this particular scenario. In this scenario, both sides have enough supplies, but they also don't have too much. Again, it's just a well-designed scenario. Neither side has so much ammunition that they can just fire away all day, but if they conserve it, they're going to be just fine. And I just think that this particular scenario is equally challenging to both sides. And I'm not the only person that really enjoys this particular scenario. As a matter of fact, this scenario has been played more times than any other scenario in Campaign Chickamauga. As of October 2023, this game has been played 97 times and resulted in 38 Union victories and 43 Confederate victories. Now, I know there's probably somebody out there asking themselves this question right now. Why do I think this scenario is so great? Because when you look at the numbers and the unit quality, it just doesn't seem all that even. And I actually agree. On paper, this doesn't really seem that even, and yet the results for the battle speak for themselves. Over 97 different games, there's been a lot of draws, and the victories for the two sides are relatively even. So how can you explain that? Because to play and win at Perryville requires excellent use of cavalry. And cavalry usage is something a lot of people really struggle with, not only in this club, but in the WDS games in general. And so I think whether or not you win at Perryville has to do with how well you can use cavalry. The cavalry numbers here are pretty large, and there's not a lot of regiments on either side, which means losing any of these regiments can cost you a lot of victory points. So you just can't afford to use them as dismounted infantry. Otherwise, in a short battle like this, that's really going to hurt you in the point column. So for either side to win here, I think, they need to minimize their cavalry losses or risk falling behind in points if they take too many. And I just think this scenario favors the commander who can best use their cavalry forces. I just really like this scenario. I think it's just really challenging for both sides. And if you're good with cavalry, you're probably going to be more successful here than someone who isn't. Alright, so those are my top 5 scenarios to play with Campaign Chickamauga. Put it in the comments down below if you agree or disagree. I'm sure everyone would have a different top 5 list. This just happens to be mine. Alright everybody, thank you for watching as always. I do appreciate it. If you liked it, be sure to like the video and also subscribe. When you do that, you'll get notified when future videos drop for our American Civil War Gaming Club YouTube channel. Alright everybody, until next time, just remember, keep gaming.